really was a very magical experience. It actually had snowed the day before we arrived, and that drive going into Oslo from the airport really looked like you were part of a holiday greeting card. But what was really spectacular was the hospitality that we received from members of the Nobel Peace Committee and the people of Oslo themselves. It was truly an amazing experience, and one that we are thrilled to be able to share part of with you here this evening. I'm going to ask one of the people who was a member of that delegation and is also a student leader here on campus to make the formal introduction of our guest this evening. Before I do that, let me say that our plan is to have our guest speak for around 45 minutes, and then he will be glad to take some questions from you, should you have any, and I know some of you do. And then we will be wrapping up around 8:30. He does have a distance to drive this evening, and I promised that I wouldn't completely over-monopolize his time while he's here in the States. Restrooms are out in the hallway to your right, should you need them. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Matt Linehausser. Matt is a senior computer science major with minors in exercise science, communication studies, and civic and professional leadership. He also is getting a special certification in cybersecurity. Matt is the president of the Honors Student Association, which is a over 250 student member club on this campus, one of the largest, and has been distinguished in a number of ways with leadership positions on campus in a variety of organizations, most noticeably through the Division of Student Affairs, where he serves as a leadership consultant. And just yesterday, he found out that he was accepted into the doctoral program of computer science at the University of Delaware.
Real quick, can everybody hear me? Is this microphone working? Okay, good. So our guest tonight traveled all the way from Norway with his son. His son is elsewhere right now watching movies and eating junk foods. Probably something that this man right here, Asle, wishes he was doing. I first had the chance to meet Asle when we traveled over to Norway, and he's a very interpersonal man. Instead of asking generic questions like, how are you, what's your major, it was more so, tell me about yourself, how's your family? And that was just truly inspiring to see someone like that, and actually relates back to a conversation we just had at dinner where we were talking about kind of the elite Westerns going to Harvard and the Ivies and such. And believe it or not, Asle, I guess if you want to call him an elite Western, he got his PhD from Pembroke College and was a Fulbright Fellow at Columbia University. So while he does have that quote-unquote elite Western title, he's not an elite Western man. He's a very humble, kind human being. So humble that he wouldn't even share. It's actually his birthday tomorrow. So if everybody could please join me. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Asle. Happy birthday to you. Real quick about him too, he is the youngest member of the Nobel Peace Committee, which only has 5 members, and before that he was the research director at the Nobel Peace Institute, so he is well versed in foreign policy, international affairs, so he's a perfect representation of somebody who would want to award this prize. Dr. Toje, thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to hearing from you.
First of all, let me start with saying what a great honor and pleasure it is for me to be here at Westchester for the first time. The first time I heard about Westchester was when one of your former students, Carl Parsoness, called me up and said, I have this group of American students who would love to come to the Nobel Institute. And since then we have built this amazing affiliation between the Nobel Committee in Westchester, and I hope that we will continue to build that relationship. But today we're here to talk about the Nobel Peace Prize and leadership, and I would like to start by telling you a story. In 1935, the Nobel Committee in Oslo receives a record number of nominations, over 500. Never before had they received so many nominations. And the nominations was for a German. His name was Karl von Ossietzky, newspaperman. Karl von Ossietzky was anti-Nazi. He was a social democrat. He had his own newspaper, and he did what newspaper types do. You know, he printed, he found the news and printed it. So Karl von Ossietzky discovered that the Nazis were building an air force in direct breach of the Versailles Treaty. So the Lufthansa was in attack the Luftwaffe, and he printed this, thinking that that is what newspapers do, thinking that this would cause outrage in the United States, in France, in Britain. It didn't, but it did land him in a concentration camp. Just a week later, he was interned. By this stage, a lot of the exiled Germans, a lot of the Germans who had left Germany because the Nazis had taken over, started this campaign. Many of them in the United States, sending nominations for Karl von Ossietzky to the Nobel Committee. This broke the committee. At that time, the committee had two foreign ministers, the present Norwegian foreign minister and the former Norwegian foreign minister. I don't know if that many of you are history majors, but it was assumed in Norway that the Nazis were not very forgiving, and I think they were right about that. And so the foreign minister said, no, we cannot give the Nobel Peace Prize to a dissident. This is a time when most countries in Europe are unaware of what the Nazis are up to. So the committee breaks up, two members leave, two members come in, and in 1936, Karl von Ossietzky receives the Nobel Peace Prize. This is the first time we give the Nobel Peace Prize to somebody who is in prison. It happened 2 times later, Aung San Suu Kyi and Liu Xiaobo, the Chinese district. The point that I want to make about Karl von Ossietzky is that at a time when Germany, an ancient and a country that has given Western civilizations and culture so much in terms of poetry, philosophy, you name it, was being taken over by these, I don't know how to describe the Nazis, I'll leave it to you, taken over by Nazis. He stood and he fought for a different Germany. And he used the powers that he had, and he paid the ultimate price. Karl von Ossietzky died shortly after being released from the concentration camp. The Nazis didn't want for him to die in camp, so they released him and then he died. In our archives at the Nobel Institute, we have a lot of interesting documents. Norwegian soldiers that came to occupy Berlin in 1945 alongside the Americans and the Brits and the French, they plundered the Gestapo headquarters and pilfered any documents they could find pertaining to the Nobel Peace Prize. So we have them now in Oslo. And I can tell you, it's bone-chilling to see a document that has a very limited circulation list. This goes between Heinrich Himmler, Göring, Richard Heydrich, known as the Butcher of Prague, and let's see, who was the last one? Goebbels, the chief propagandist minister. And in this note, they discuss what are we going to do about Ossietzky. There are 3 alternatives. Either we kill him, we send him to Dachau and he will die, or we just keep him in the concentration camp he's at. He's got poor health, he's got pneumonia, he's probably going to die there in due time. Or should we release him? Come on, we have the Olympics in Berlin this year. It will be a PR disaster. And you know, like, who cares about the rabble rouser? Let him go. And they decided to keep him in the concentration camp. Karl von Ossietzky died. And with the Nobel Peace Prize to Nazi Germany, the Nazis lost their minds over this huge diplomatic conflict between Norway and Nazi Germany, and a conflict that the Norwegian government certainly did not want. And to me, this is the proudest moment of the Nobel Peace Prize. That the members of the Nobel Committee recognized the Nazis for what they were in 1936, long before the Holocaust going back a bit, 1833, a child was born in Stockholm. One of 8 children. Only 3 of them will live to see their 21st birthday. Poor family. Alfred Nobel, he grows up on the streets of Stockholm selling matches. He's trying to get food for his family. He's got a father who's an inventor, but terrible with money, always on the run for the bailiffs. His father then skips the country, goes to Russia, makes himself a fortune, becomes the arms manufacturer of the Russian Tsar. His brothers go over, his 2 other brothers, they make it big as well, in arms manufacture and in oil. Alfred grows up in St. Petersburg. Alfred was a very sickly child, and he had quite a dark disposition. I read this poem that he had written, where the poem is about, I'm not going to quote it because it's in Swedish, but the point of the poem is his mother standing over the cradle with a light, afraid, waiting for the moment that her son is going to die. He was a very sickly child. Throughout his life, Alfred Nobel had kind of a disposition that was not really life-affirming. He had an amazing intellect, spoke 4 languages before he was 12, went to Paris to become an engineer, and then went on to have an amazing career as an industrialist and an inventor. Registered 355 patents in his lifetime, most famously for dynamite, named after the Greek word for power, dynamitis, and this made him a fortune. Alfred Nobel became basically the richest bachelor in the world. And if there's somebody like that you can sort of latch on to think about what he was like, I think Bill Gates is also, not much of a people's person, an inventor, and fabulously rich. Alfred, during his lifetime, accumulated wealth. He gave some money to students, but for the most part, he kept the whole thing intact. Then he got to read his own obituary. Very, very unusual that you get to read your own obituary, but his elder brother died, and a lot of the international newspapers assumed it was Alfred who had died. And he read his own obituary in his, where he was living in San Remo in Italy. And he found that a lot of people were not all that impressed with Alfred Nobel. Why would they? Alfred had invented smoke-free gunpowder, which increased the killing rate on the battlefield immensely. He had invented dynamite, which was essential for bomb making, and he had bought Bofors, the Swedish arms manufacturer, with the aim of making it into one of the world's leading arms manufacturers, and he was fabulously rich. A lot of people had problems with that. So he starts thinking about, what am I going to do with this fortune? Writes his will and testimony in Paris, 1895, and he divvies up the whole thing for 5 awards. 1 in physics, 1 in chemistry, 1 in physiology, 1 in literature, and 1 in peace. And I want to read to you what he says about the Nobel Peace Prize. He says, "The person who shall have done the most or the best work for fraternity amongst peoples, the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and the promotion of peace congresses." So basically what he was talking about are 3 different paths to peace. They are, you could view them separate, but obviously they reinforce each other. One is the fraternity amongst nations is about creating the conditions for peace. Then you have arms control. And finally, you have the work that goes into ending wars. And the Nobel Peace Prize has, over the years, since the first prize was awarded in 1901, footnote on that. So he passes in 1896, gives away his entire fortune, and lo and behold, his relatives didn't think this was a very good idea, that he should give away this massive fortune to these silly awards. So they sued, and so the court case took about 5 years. And then finally, we get to hand out the first Nobel Peace Prize in 1901. My former boss at the Nobel Institute, it was mentioned I was a research director at the Nobel Institute for 8 years, 7. And my boss there was Geir Lundestad, a great historian, probably Norway's best known historian, wrote a book now about the Nobel Peace Prize, and he says, basically, it breaks down like this. In the years from 1901 until 1914, the Nobel Peace Prize is focused upon arbitration. This is something we don't talk so much about anymore, but the idea was basically that if 2 countries have a problem with each other, they should go to a court, and the court should arbitrate between them, and then they should, just before anything is decided, they should sign up a rule, respect the ruling. Of course, World War I showed the problem with that sort of reasoning. In the years from World War I up until World War II, it's about the League of Nations. That's a red thread. The Nobel Peace Prize keeps on emphasizing how a more well-ordered world will be a more peaceful world. And this continues after World War II, this time with the League of, with the United Nations. And after 1989, you see the Nobel Peace Prize taking new paths, if you will. The Nobel Peace Prize moves towards democracy promotion, promotion of education, the role of women, the role of minorities, or the respect for minorities. It's not so easy to see, you know, like that clear red thread after the end of the Cold War, and I think that also reflects what we see in the world today. Robert E. Kaplan said something during a dinner that I found very interesting. He said that we're in a world that is collapsing and being forged anew at the same time. So we're building while it's collapsing, and that makes up for a really contradictory picture. So we're in a situation that, on the one hand, we will, in one breath, we will be discussing, you know, old school politics. The Russians have occupied Crimea, they've broken international law. What should we do about it? This is something that you could have discussed at any moment since the Napoleonic Wars. At the same time, we're discussing climate change. How can we make sure that we have a planet that is inhabitable for our species also in the future? And at the same time, we're going back to some of the grievances and some of the injustices that have been visited upon peoples from different groups. And we've recognized the need to make amends for this. I think that when you look at the history of the Nobel Peace Prize, it's really interesting to see how often the Nobel Committee got it right. Over the years, the Nobel Peace Prize has been given to people that everybody knows the name. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and the Dalai Lama. Funny story about the Dalai Lama. I met him. He came to the Nobel Institute. You know, like we have this thing where laureates, if they come to Oslo, they're always invited to swing by the institute, and we'll put, you know, throw together a lunch, and it's nice. And so I was, you know, sent down to meet the Dalai Lama, you know, in his magnificent robes. And they say about the Dalai Lama is that he's special. And as we were standing outside the door going into the chambers, he suddenly seized my hand. And so we were standing there holding hands. And we walked in, and he kept holding my hand. And you know, my wife finds this really, really funny because I'm not really the sort of holding hand type of guy at the best of times. Certainly not with other men, but so she finds this amusing. But you know, like it says something about the Dalai Lama that it wasn't weird, and that's we kept on holding hands during lunch as well. Great man. The Oxford Dictionary of Contemporary History says that the Nobel Peace Prize is the most prestigious award in the world. I wouldn't know, but you know, who would argue with the dictionary? I think that if you look on why the Nobel Peace Prize is such a prestigious award, I think it speaks to what Abraham Lincoln called the better angels of our nation. I think that the longing for peace is something that cuts across culture, across ethnicity, across race, across religion. It's a global longing. And I hope that none of you here have ever experienced war firsthand or visited a war zone. But I can assure you that war is not glamorous, and modern war certainly is not. And it makes normal life impossible. And to live in a state of fear is horrible for human beings, no matter who they are. And I think that is part of sort of a call from below, desire for peace from ordinary citizens all around the world. And I think it says something nice about us as a species, that, you know, if the Martians did land on this planet, we could inform them that the most prestigious award in the world is a peace prize. I think that says something nice about us as species. But I think also, you know, why the prestigious nature of the Nobel Peace Prize is down to the laureates, to the men and women who have made themselves deserving to receive this award. And I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the present and only look at the most recent awards. And I'm so happy that the honors program here at West Chester has taken this task much more seriously, and that the students are going through laureates past and seeing what they brought to the table. I mentioned Kolkomosiewski. It's dear to my heart. I do have a special respect for those who stay and fight for their country rather than leave it and criticize it from abroad. And I'm not speaking ill of the asylum seekers and the refugees of this world. I am not. But I do have a particular respect for people like Osiewski. Another person that I have an amazing amount of respect for is last year's laureate, Nadia Murad, who was a young woman in a small village wanting to become a hairdresser. This was her life's ambition. When the IS came to town, the IS had ordered from on high that all women that were not Sunni Muslims should be taken as sex slaves. She was bought and sold as like cattle. She was abused, and finally she escaped. And I think we can all relate that if something that horrendous had happened to any of us, we would never want to speak of it again. We would desperately want to forget it because we are human beings. And when something that horrible has happened, it's difficult to revisit it. She did that. She wrote the book, The Lost Girl. And speaking to Nadia Murad, I was struck with the sense of mission that she has. And what is that mission? Several thousand Yazidi women are still kept in sex slavery. And it's for them that she's speaking, because she knew that if we were allowed to forget this, we would ignore it, because it's too difficult to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about rape and sex slavery around the dinner table or in any polite company. So somebody had to come forth and say what actually happened. She did that. Despite being, you know, she's frail. She's physically strong. It takes a lot out of her. The Nobel ceremony took a lot out of her. But she has this sense of mission for women around the world who are victims of rape in war, and also for her own people that were the victims of genocide. They were attempting to exterminate the Yazidi nation and to bring that nation together, scattered now across 4 continents, over 50 different countries. People are living, you know, in Norway, in Germany, in the United States, and to bring them back home to the mountain where the people originally resided. People like that have a special strength. I do believe that we're all capable of that strength. And I think that's one of the other reasons why the Nobel Peace Prize captures the imagination of people. It's the only award of the Nobel Prizes, certainly, that anybody can win. For the other ones, you have to be really smart or really good at writing. Well, some people are, but not always. And I think by lifting an individual or an organization, or in the case last year, 2 individuals, up into the international limelight, and allows somebody to access the mic for a moment and talk about something important. And that is one of the inspiring things of being a member of the Nobel Committee. I now want to talk a little bit about how we make decisions in the Nobel Committee. And I only been a member for a year, and it's the weirdest thing, you know, because I did my PhD in England, and then I came back to Norway, did some jobs here and there, did think tanks and stuff, and then I got this gig as research director of the Nobel Institute, and I thought, well, you know, my career is crowned, I have gotten as far as I can. And then the most interesting thing happens. Going out from a lecture, a member of parliament comes to like running after me, grabbing after me and says, "We have to put your name in the ring." And I was saying, "What? You have to be our candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize." What had happened is that one of the parties in parliament had put forth a candidate to be a member of the Nobel Committee that the rest of the parliament said, "No, he will not be a member of the Nobel Committee. He doesn't have what we're looking for." Personally, I don't have a dog in that fight. People who work at the Nobel Institute, we live with the committee that we're assigned to. We don't have any views of candidates, certainly. So I just smiled, and I took my wife out to dinner. That's embarrassing. That's the last time I took my wife out to dinner. I really should do that more. Took my wife out to dinner, and I was just making conversation, saying strange things happened today. This guy from Parliament said that I should become a member of the Nobel Committee, but I would have to give up a tenured position. Academician, we do not give up tenured positions for anything. And my wife said, "You should do it." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "You should definitely do it. I'm tired of having you, at the dinner table going on and on about the Nobel Peace Prize and the history of the Nobel Peace Prize and who deserves it and who does not deserve it. And now, just get yourself into the committee and make the arguments where it matters." And not to me. So I agreed, and for the strangest, and this is sort of a lesson in life, sometimes I've been a little bit controversial in Norway, but this moment I was the most well-liked person in the entire country. I got text messages from the leaders from all the parties in Parliament wishing me good luck and saying that it had been a great choice. And I think that really reflects how much they dislike the other guy. So every year we get nominations for the Nobel Peace Prize, and I think it's great what you're doing here at Westchester. I shouldn't say, but I do notice your nomination, and I think the way you do this is brilliant. Over the years, back in '35, when the deluge of nominations for Karl von Ossietzky came in, the years after, the nominations would usually be less than 50. Now we get routinely between 300 and 400 nominations. I think this year's count is somewhere in like 330s. And the way we deal with this is we work like you would make a good soup. You reduce. You don't sort of dip your hand in the hat and pick out the laureates. So we start by eliminating. And every year we get dictator nominations, if you will. There's always some people who feel that their particular gold-drenched dictator deserves a Nobel Peace Prize just for being the father of the nation, and those tend to be eliminated quite quickly. And then you have people who are on trial for things that have nothing to do with their nomination, and where the lawyer would think it would be a great thing to mention in court that this person is actually nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. They also tend to fall to the wayside. Then our consultants get to work. We write, we get papers on each of the nominees. And I thought it was a tough job writing these reports when I was research director. It was fun as well, because the charge is basically, tell us what we need to know. Nothing else. What we need to know. And of course, what do they need to know? And it's a difficult topic. It's a difficult discipline, but very, very stimulating once you get the hang of it. Reading all these damn papers is much more work. It took me the entire weekend earlier this year to read it all. Then the discussion starts, and the decision is made by consensus. So basically, we keep on reducing the number of names on our table, and then it gets into the part where we are having a conversation amongst each other, and this is really interesting because you have the committee roughly reflects the makeup of the Norwegian Parliament. So you have your socialists, you have your conservatives, you have your liberals, and you have the agrarian party or the Christian party or what have you. People coming from different walks of life who have completely different views of peace. And the trick is to try to persuade them that your idea is a good one. And It's grueling. Meetings will go on routinely for 8 hours straight. By the way, like this was the greatest shock. Like after I was elected to the committee, I felt like this time, this walking through the doors into the chamber that has remained unchanged since 1904, sitting down on the chair where so many of my heroes in history had sat before me. I felt I'd really arrived, and this is where, when the leader of the committee, Ben Anders, says, yeah, and by the way, as the youngest member of the committee, you will have to get the sandwiches. And I still get the sandwiches and pour coffee. But other than that, we're pretty equal, at least in terms of speaking time. It's an interesting process. We read a lot. During this process, we accumulate hundreds and hundreds of pages on the strong candidates. Read it all. We have meetings, we discuss, we reflect, we have another meeting, and then it just, I heard this from all the committee members, that suddenly it just crystallizes and everybody sees it, and it's this one. That's a good thing. It's consensus decision making. You need to have an open-ended time frame. You can't have a deadline on consensus decision making, but it's a great way to make decisions in the sense that once we have decided, we agree on a very, very terse statement. And we discuss every sentence in that one pager, and that's all we say. We don't say anymore. The committee stands united behind the laureate, and we do not discuss the laureates. Actually, we're bound by 50 years of secrecy about what has gone on in the chamber, and that is, it's the Swedes actually. Like we want to bring it down to a more academic 25 years, but the Swedes are I'll say absolutely no. So we're stuck with 50 years, and that's basically so that everybody who's present should be sure that whatever we say cannot come back and bite you in the behind later in life, because these are very, very frank discussions. When going over the candidates, like I'm always asked about, what would disqualify anybody for getting the Nobel Peace Prize? And the truthful answer to that question is not a lot. Jastarov was a terrorist. He blew up airliners, and he got the Nobel Peace Prize. So that the bar is quite low there. I'm just saying. And yeah, we're not looking for people who cheated on their husbands. We are not looking for indiscretions. But of course, like your achievement has to be, somehow in sync with your sins. And as the French poet said, sometimes having clean hands means having no hands. In some conflicts, everybody who's in the position to end the conflict or to bring about peace have blood on their hands. And I think that was the case with Rabin and with Arafat. I think Shimon Peres was the only one who didn't have blood in his hands in quite a literal sense amongst those. Sometimes that can be tough. It's reflected in the discussions. But every now and then you come across something that just moves you. And I think that was, for me, the case with Denis Mukwege, the Congolese doctor who received the Nobel Peace Prize last year. That's not a leadership lesson. Denis Mukwege is very much a surgeon. He's also an intellectual, but he's very much a surgeon. He's so much a surgeon that when he came into the office of Olav Nødstad, the director of the Nobel Institute, he was kind of flustered on the phone, and I was like, so what's going on? And I'm trying to get hold of Mukwege. I can't get hold of him. Like they say that really he's going to call to the phone, but he doesn't come. Denis Mukwege was in surgery, and being a surgeon, his aides would come and say, there's a really important call for you, and he says, I'm not done. So he finished the operation, stitched up the patient, and got the happy news. Denis Mukwege was a young surgeon who saw what rape in war means physically for the victims. He specialized in this. He developed an entirely new branch of medicine in terms of rectifying procedures. And this is, again, stuff that nobody really wants to talk about. I think, the speech, his laureate speech in Oslo was very strong, because, the thing about doctors is they can be amazingly blunt, and somehow, the non-biased language, the coolness of the tone, while describing the injuries that he encountered in his hospital in Congo, just made it all the stronger. Dennis McGregor almost got killed shortly before he came to Oslo. He's not a popular man. He's spoken out against the warlords, and he cannot leave his hospital compound. He lives in his hospital compound. He carries out surgery, and this is his life. But he goes to church, and his wife told me during dinner that they were on their way to church, and then another sick woman came in, and McGregor said, I have to look to this patient before I go to church. You go on ahead. And his wife came to the church, and there were some unsavory characters standing in front of the church. And one of the congregation said, they are not members of our congregation, said, we think they have guns. And they were there waiting for Dr. McGregor. Of course, one shouldn't speculate, but I would imagine that they were out for his life. It's a dangerous country, Congo. Didn't stop him. For a short period, he left the country to protect his family, then he returned. Different kind of bravery, a different kind of leadership. A leadership that is so required in a country like Congo. I think McGregor shows that it's also different ways to work and further the cause of peace. Also through all the different kinds of life than being a diplomat or being an activist. He's a doctor. But through his work, he has brought attention to the United Nations, to the United States, around the world, for the problem of rape in war. And this is what we tried to lift forward for the Nobel Committee last year, that for the longest time, even in this country, rape in war has been seen as part of the game. It's regrettable, but it's seen as something that just happens. It's war. What do you expect? Worse things happen in war. But what we have seen time and again is that rape is employed as a strategy in war. And in the case of the IS, we even have, we have the orders coming from on high that this is what we do. We will take the women as sex slaves. This is our right. This is our duty. And it was a topic that, I have a background in war studies. We never heard about, in war studies. We were missile counters, and we were focused on the mechanics of war. And to see and to read about what has been going on in our times. This happened in your lifetimes. Happened recently. What happened in Syria and in Iraq. And to be able to lift that forth and to create momentum around the world that this has to end, that this is not acceptable, is something that is definitely worthwhile. I think I'm going to end my presentation now because I've met Westchester students before, and you tend to have much better questions than I have lectures. So if you guys don't mind, then shall we go into the Q&A?
There you go. I run the microphone around. If anyone has a question, you can just raise your hand and I'll.
Yeah, let me suggest if you have a question, please start by stating your name so that we can have a nice familiarity, and then be slow in stating your question.
Nobody wants to be first. Sir, thank you.
Yeah, my name is Bill Quilty. I'm a Westchester alumnus in 1980. And I just have a foreign policy question for the doc. Given that the European Union is going to have important parliamentary elections, I think, coming up in June, and it's expected that 30% probably of the European Parliament will probably be Eurosceptic people.
Mm.
In the long run, will this kind of pushback within the Parliament be good for European unity and the European Union in general?
It's a great question for me. You know, I wrote my PhD about the European Union.
I know.
Thank you. Well, I should have said at the beginning, you know, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Nobel Committee. Only the leader of the committee speaks on behalf of the Nobel Committee. So you please don't, you know, put any of this at their door. And now I'm just talking as a scholar. No, I don't think it's going to be a big problem. I think that, and this is my view, and I know it's a minority view, but this is democracy. This is what democracy looks like. If you have leaders that are not responding adequately to the political demands of the population, they will elect people from other parties. And I know it's a travesty and it's horrible for the people in the parties that have lost votes, but that's how it goes. And I can assure you it was a great shock to European democracies when the Social Democrats started winning majorities all around in Europe. Because these people were, you know, communists, weren't they? And turned out okay. It's the way politics works. For the European Union, will 30% populists or the new right in Parliament make much of a difference? No, because the European Parliament is a fake Parliament. It's not a real Parliament. It's, you know, like you would assume that it works somehow, you know, somehow like Congress or the Senate, and I guess the Commission would be like the President. No, it doesn't work like that at all. The European Parliament has some powers. They are quite vague. They have a power of initiative, but so I'm sure you would have some quirky initiatives coming out in the European Parliament that would go nowhere with the Commission. I think the European Union, for the longest time, has been insulated from public opinion. With good reason, it was created to be insulated from public opinion. The members of the Commission, the mighty agency of the EU, are not elected. They are appointed by the nation states. And in the Council, the nation states are themselves represented. These are the most powerful entities in addition to the European Court. And I think on issues of migration, the EU had a way too slow learning curve. And for the longest time, they didn't understand that immigration was a main political concern all over Europe. I was writing about this, saying that, you know, when you see an issue being ranked so high amongst the voters all over Europe, where you have 70% of the voters, few all over Europe, about 70% put immigration as #1 concern. And worse than that, they were saying that I really care about this question as well. It's not an intellectual pursuit for me. This is I really care about this. And the EU did nothing. And I think the EU will have to find a way to reconnect with the ordinary citizen of Europe, or it doesn't deserve to have the position it has. And I think, you know, having worked in Brussels, you know, like you can shout that, but they won't hear it, because Brussels is a little bit like DC. We call it, have you heard about the bell jar? It's like a giant bell jar has been put over Brussels, and it seems that, you know, everything that happens everywhere else is just far, far, far away, and they just keep on, you know, doing the great work that they do, and they do a lot of good work. But demonstrations in Paris doesn't really concern the European Union, and it should stop to concern the European Union.
Hi, I'm Asle. I was wondering, you mentioned how the Nobel Peace Prize awarding it helps bring key issues to light. So how do you think this influences policy making around the world, and like to what extent?
So Asle, I'm not going to lie to you. The Nobel Peace Prize doesn't create peace. The Nobel Peace Prize can, at the best of time, be a thumb on the scale of something that's in the balance. And you see that the Nobel Committee, especially since the Cold War, increasingly have tried to impact ongoing processes. Let me give you an example. During the Nobel banquet, I ended up sitting next to the son of Juan Manuel Santos, the president of Colombia. His son is not going for a political career, lovely man, by the way. And he was saying that, you know, his father had invested his entire political prestige in bringing an end to the most long-running civil war in the Americas between the Colombian government and the FARC guerrillas. He had brokered the settlement, you know, and he brought in the Cubans, the Norwegians were involved, the peace treaty was written, and he felt that he needed to have a popular mandate, so he put it up for a referendum. The day of the referendum was marked by inclement weather, as they say, euphemism, really bad, horrible weather, and they lost quite narrowly. And the son says that they were in Cartagena at that time, and he said, "I've never seen my father so despondent." It was as if, you know, this force of nature that was always, you know, forward surging, you know, like with fire in his eyes, had just become an empty shell. It was over. And then the phone rang, and it was Olav Nørstad calling from Oslo saying that he had been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And the father's son said it was amazing. It was like a real shot in the arm that he bounced back and decided to fight for it. We will see if the peace treaty holds. I think it will. And I'm not saying that things are peachy in Colombia. I'm not saying that the underlying causes that brought this conflict, the inequities, the landless peasantry, the violence that you see, especially in poor neighborhoods, has abated. It hasn't. But it's not war. And I think anything is better than war. And I think Colombia is making small steps in the right direction. But to make these steps was necessary. It was necessary to have peace. And I think that's one example of how the Nobel Peace Prize can enter into and be a thumb on the scales. But of course you have the counter-example. I mentioned the Zelala Gabi and Shimon Peres, also opposed the process, early 90s. Then the Good Nobel Committee felt that the parties involved in these trade negotiations needed sort of a push to get over the line. They never got over the line. The Oslo process spiraled and then disintegrated and has become, you know, like a bit of a joke, certainly in Israel. So it doesn't always work. We try. We try our best, and we look for devastating conflicts that should be brought to an end. And when people of good faith are involved in this and are willing to invest in it, sometimes the committee feels that this is the right time. Sometimes we don't. But we don't pretend that we are the bringers of peace to the world. All we can do is to shine a spotlight on the situation and try to get the world's attention to this one issue for a period, and to bolster the people involved in that process and hopefully bring about good outcomes. And I think when it comes to sex slavery and rape and war, it's amazing how much focus it is on that now, especially in the UN. And I really hope that this country, the United States, will take more clear stance on that than we have so far. I think this is something that needs to be done, and I think that's something that a young generation, and I'm trying desperately not to show how much I resent your youth. Well, the grey heads, it's good, but this is a task for the young generation, and I think it's achievable. I think it's something that your congressmen and your leaders need to be reminded about. I don't think it's a tall order, and I think that if you're reasonable and you argue in a reasonable way, you can find a very sympathetic air, and I think that's hopefully the sort of dynamics that we hope to spark.
I was just curious, you talked about so many incredible leaders tonight. I was just curious what your thoughts would be on how we as current college students can apply that to our lives and our community engagement as we move forward.
Well, Katie, that was sort of the question I was hoping that you would ask. I could, say, be true to yourself. mystical, Star Wars type. I think there is something that has been placed in our hearts. This desire for justice and recoiling injustice is something that good people around the world share. And I think, I'm not saying that each one of you should be going through your life true or false, but I do hope that you keep that, you listen to that voice in your heart about what's right, and what's fair, and what is not fair. Not give in to chauvinism, and also lend some support. I think it's easy to forget in this digital age. Wow, I'm really talking about digital age. I think it's very difficult to understand what it's like to be the front man, be Nadia Murad, to be the front woman in this case. How lonely it is. Because you only see them on television or on YouTube or whatever, and they look composed, and like in the criticism, they like it's entertaining. It's a good show. All these people, they need encouragement, and to be that kind of person who drops a note, sends an email, just some kind words. And that's not just for people who's running for the Nobel Peace Prize, but that's people in your community, people you encounter, people who take a stand that you agree with. Maybe you don't feel like taking that particular fight yourself, but letting them know that you care and that you are encouraged by them, and wishing them, to carry on with your fight. I think it's important, and I think it's frequently forgotten. But like Harriet Westchester, I guess you hold yourself to a higher standard. So what I would really like you guys to do is, makes me really happy is to see a Trump rally chanting Nobel, Nobel. I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. No, seriously. I think it's great that the leader of the United States aspires to receive a Nobel Peace Prize. I think that's great. And I really hope that the president does things that would make him deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. He's the most powerful man in the world. People have different opinions of it, but it gives me hope. And I hope that all of you will rise to office and reach positions of power and influence and try to make the world a slightly better place. To be part of that upward surge of humanity that we have seen, and your generation has seen more of it than I think any generation before you in history. And not give in to this impulse of chauvinism over sex, chauvinism over sexual orientation, chauvinism over nationality, over skin color, over culture. It's not helpful. And I think this is something that I think we're experiencing all of us pretty much every day, that we get confronted with things that we find outrageous. But I do believe that having a proper conversation, even with people that you suspect you dislike intensely, will frequently make you realize that these are not bad people, they're just reason about things in a different way than I do. And hopefully, if you bring forward your best arguments and you argue it in a nice way, you might be able to, plant a little seed that might in time grow to people agreeing with you, and that's always nice. Of course, I take it for granted that you're all the good guys here, so.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I'm a second year student at Honors College. And I'm curious to know how you personally yourself define the word peace. What does peace mean to you?
Well, that's an easy question. Basically in peace studies there are two concepts. You have negative peace and you have positive peace. I'm a realist. I come out of war studies. I believe that peace is an absence of war. That's my definition of peace. as a member of the Nobel Committee, I am charged with being part of a tradition. And this tradition has a wider definition of peace, based on the testimony of Alfred Nobel. He explicitly said fraternity amongst peoples, and we can't ignore that. So even if in my scholarship, I always use a very narrow definition of peace because, in fairness, positive peace is a hornet's nest. It's difficult to write about because positive peace means a society that allows the members of the society to achieve their potential. But how do you define that? Is that about education, nutrition? Is difficult. So for somebody who can come out of that particular branch of academia, I'm definitely on the absence of war. In the committee, I'm open to be persuaded. That's it's part of the game. You have to be open to arguments. And when it came to last year's award, obviously, I think as was written by the committee, when rape is employed as a weapon on board, as it was by the IS, then you're on terra firma, then you're on firm ground, also in the narrow definition of peace. And I'm sure there will be many discussions in the years to come. Members are on the committee for 6 years at the time, so I'm going to be with you for a while longer. But these are the kind of discussions that we keep on having, and we try to be informed by scholarship. We try to bring in the best people who are working on different topics to understand what right now is the state of the art, what we know about what fosters peace. And that's an evolving agenda, it's political science, it's not a hard science, I have to admit.
My name is Dominic Sweeney, I'm a first-year student in the Honors College, and I was wondering, just like, with the people that are being put up for the Nobel Peace Prize, a lot of them are met with opposition from political groups or genes that they might be exposing, and how maybe different groups or the Nobel Peace Committee itself would maybe look after these people that are being put up for this prize, because I know a lot of them either get jail time or even have a bounty on their head. So I was just wondering, if there is a process or if there's any groups that maybe keep an eye on how these people are doing.
Great question. I think once you are a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, the eyes of the world is on you, and that affords some degree of protection. Sometimes it doesn't. Shirin Abedi, the Iranian dissident, was forced from her country. The award money, $1 million, was confiscated, and she now lives abroad, forced from her nation, from Iran. Liu Xiaobo received the Nobel Peace Prize, I guess that's 2009, and there were a lot of people hoping that the Chinese government would release him. They didn't. He died in captivity. Same with Kalfan Osiecki. It's a discussion that we have. How will the Nobel Peace Prize influence the life of the laureate? It's a difficult thing, because for the rest of your life you will be a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. It can be a burden. I think it has been a burden for some laureates. It's difficult to go back to just having a day job and just being no one in the supermarket once you're a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. But I think, and I wasn't part of the decision making, so I'm just speculating here. When Malala Yousafzai received the Nobel Peace Prize, 17 years old, I imagine this is the kind of discussions they would have. Malala, by that stage, I think that ship had sailed for Malala. She was already a global celebrity. And I'm sure that is one of the things they discussed. Malala is an amazing woman, when she gets on the podium, she shines. She is an amazing public speaker. Once she gets off the podium, she she is a very shy 17-year-old girl. And I have so much admiration for her that she manages to keep a part of herself, to be, just to be Malala, just to be a normal girl with the interests that a girl has when she's 17 years old, and at the same time playing this role as the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, talking about women's right to education. Still, millions of women on the Indian subcontinent are denied even basic education. It has to change, and it's an ongoing process. But I think that Malala's work has really made a difference for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of girls who are now going to school in Pakistan and in India. And I'm not sure that an older person would have had that impact. It's amazing how Malala inspired young people in her native country and also far, far beyond. Well, now you're waking up. Now we're getting to the end.
My name is Aaron, first year student in the Honors College. I was just wondering, within the bounds of your contract, what's the favorite part of your job?
I'll just reiterate the question because you might also switch on. I didn't catch your name.
I'm Aaron.
Aaron. Aaron asked about what's basically what I guess the favorite part of my job in the committee is. Right?
What's that?
Yes,
I'm
your
sorry.
favorite part of the job.
Yeah.
My favorite part of the job. Well, it's not getting the sandwich, I can tell you that. My favorite part of the job is when you get to that moment when things are getting real, when 330 nominations will be whittled down to a dozen, and the discussions start for real. It's difficult. I don't know if any of you ever had boyfriends or girlfriends. Sometimes when you're having a serious discussion, it's difficult to persuade each other. Worse arguments about silly stuff, and to try to construct my arguments for the candidate that I like in such a way that it will be music to the ears of the other people in the committee. Try to bring forth arguments that I think they will find compelling. And I'll tell you, the least favorite part of my job is, and I admit it, I'm a small person. I'm a very small person, because you fall in love with certain nominations, and giving up on that when the rest of the committee says no, we're not gonna proceed with that one. We're going to take this. To make that switch, and not to be despondent, and to actually to lose, and then try to muster some degree of enthusiasm for the other guy's, or the other woman's candidate is hard, man. It's very, very hard. But I'm a small person. I'm working. Okay, please. Yeah, yellow.
Hello, my name is Justin. And what would you say distinguishes an effective leader to a leader that has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize?
I'm not sure if there is a distinction between the two. Most of the people who have received the Nobel Peace Prize are effective leaders, but they're effective leaders in different ways. Some are successful politicians, some less so. Jimmy Carter got the Nobel Peace Prize. No, I'm joking, but what they said at the award ceremony was that Jimmy Carter was the best ex-president the United States ever had, and I subscribe to that. But I think being effective in the context of the Nobel Peace Prize is not just about doing good deeds. It's also about getting the word out. And I'm not talking here about forming your own PR company. When I was a very young man, I worked for Mother Teresa at her home for the dying in Kaligat in Kolkata. And Mother Teresa was certainly not, a publicist. She was a nun. And her her reputation grew from the people who had worked with her and the people who had seen the work that she had done for the dying of Calcutta. And I can tell you that it was a rough ride, you know, like coming from the West and dealing with the dirt and the dying, quite frankly, of people. Nothing I prepared before it. And to meet Mother Teresa at Prayer was a very hard to describe type of, it gave you renewed energy. This frail little woman, her strength lent strength to so many other people and to continue the work. But I feel that I haven't answered your question completely. Are you happy, or would you like to have it come back?
I am happy.
Thank you. What's the question up there?
Hi, I'm Abby.
Hi, Asle.
Met earlier in the rec center. My question's a little less philosophical because I'm curious about the process. So once you've read through the nominations and you've vetted some of them, how do you find detailed and credible information about the other candidates, especially if they're people whose work isn't very well known?
Thank you, great question. Basically, back in the good old days, you would have just some respected professors who would be our consultants. Now times have changed, so we have area specialists. You cannot, you won't get anywhere without having Arabic speakers, because what the English-speaking media prints about, you know, people in the Arab world is often not entirely reliable. So you need to have somebody who speaks the language. We have Spanish speakers, we have Russian speakers, we have Mandarin speakers, we have Hindi speakers. But what we do is, once we get down to a short list, a very, very short list, we reach out to the leading expert in the world on that topic. And regardless of what your interest is, somebody has written a PhD about it, I'm sure. And I think it speaks very well of the academic community that our colleagues do not leak. So you never get anybody on CNN saying, well, actually, I was the one who wrote the report on Malala. No, I did that. Nobody does that. So, and these reports that we get from the greatest experts are usually lengthy, going into great detail about claims made, about the work they have done, and what the evidence says. So it's not charitable. It's real scholarship. Difficult to read, but I have to say that it's immensely helpful. We need to know what we need to know, and we need to know the bad as well as the good. We can't gloss over the bad, because we will be confronted with the bad by the media later on, or we, the leader of the committee, will. And so we need to know it, and we need to have a serious discussion about how dirty hands can you have in this case. But as I said, you know, like, so the bar is not necessarily very high. It depends on what you have done and what benefit it has had for mankind, you know, in relation to the testament of Alfred Nobel. But thanks, Abby. And I have to say, you know, I very much enjoyed the rock climbing lesson. You should all go and check it out. It's amazing, climbing wall. You know, like I really wanted to go up there. It was a stranger thing, you know, like, I haven't seen climbing from up close since I was a university student myself. I was a really bad university student. I was the worst. Only thing I did was climbing. I went up north to university up north just to do more sports, winter climbing, you know, ice axes, all that kind of stuff. Then I fell off a mountain. And it's a God's miracle. I fell 180 meters. I broke every bone in my body. I broke my back, fractured my skull three places, broke the sternum, broke all my wrists, open fractures in both ankles. Almost died in the helicopters and spent a year and a half in hospital learning to walk again. And then I became a good student because I was, frankly, you know, the reaction that when I saw you in the climbing room, my hands just became so sweaty. and you know,
Mine did too.
And you can't really be a good climber if you have sweaty hands. So like, but it was great to see. And then,
My name is Catherine, and I was just wondering if you draw more attention to any one issue in America right now, what that would be.
okay, this is not normal committee, but I think And this is, you know, like, don't be upset with me. You know, I'm a foreigner. I know I'm a foreigner. I have no business having strong opinions about, you know, the internal politics of the United States, not my country. So, you know, please, you know, take that caveat. I think the American school system is failing America. I think you are underutilizing the domestic talent in this country. It seems to me that America has gotten into this position where you think, well, you know, like, everybody in the world wants to come to America, so, you know, like, you want IT science, you know, people who work in IT, will get them out of India. You know, like, we'll get our athletes from there, we'll get all our actors from Britain and Canada. And I think that it's a shame. It's a shame that you're not utilizing the talent that you have in this country. And traveling around in America, you know, like going to places like West Virginia or South Carolina or Minnesota, Illinois, I meet these high school kids that have so much promise, that are unlucky in that they are going to crap schools, and they will not get a shot to develop their capacity to, you know, to their full bloom. And I think it's a shame. I think we should change it. That's just a foreigner's view, and please don't, you know, don't be upset and don't take it too seriously. You probably know much better what's wrong with America than I do. Please.
My name's Evan. So as a person who's been able to meet so many influential individuals in a lifetime, is there any one person that you can think of specifically that was able to say the most with the least amount of words?
Okay, I'll tell you a story. You know, like weirdest dinner I ever had. I had with Russian President Putin, and so basically we're up on the stage and it's this 4-hour-long debate, and so I'm sitting up there in this big chair for 4 hours with a camera on me, and you should like go like this with your head, and you shouldn't look bored, you know, like so. And after a while, I got sort of tired of all the sycophantic questions. You know, how did you become such a great president? Without questions from the audience. So I sort of jumped in and said, you know, like I feel that we will all be unsatisfied unless, you know, the president comments on Ukraine and Russia's actions in Ukraine. And then, you know, like Putin launches into this long answer about all the grievances, all the questions on to Russia, and, you know, some of the grievances I agree with, you know, not that. But he goes on this sort of rant, and then I push my luck, and I put my hand up again and said, Mr. President, you didn't really answer the question. And then he sent me a look, like he wanted, you know, like in this sort of choking look. And he didn't respond very, you know, with many words after that. But he said that. And later I was told that I had been on the evening news in Russia, and the headline was, Russian president puts rude American in his place. So I was American. That was with few words. He can be really scary guy.
I was just wondering, like, is there anything that you think, because like Nobel's will and everything, like it was made so long ago, like is there anything that should, if you could make the change, like to update it for current world, or are you happy the way it is?
I think you know that it's a bit like the American Constitution. There are two schools, same as with the American Constitution. You have the originalist, who says Nobel's will should be interpreted as it was intended at the time of writing, and so they say the phrasing means that no, it's not all. It's not for the people who work for the reduction of standing armies, or the people who work for fraternity amongst nations, or the people who promote peace congresses. It should be all three. People should, you know, the laureates should do all three things. Then the short list will be really short. So the Nobel Committee has taken a dynamic interpretation of the will ever since the first. And in addition, it says that has in the past year done the next year. And you know, people go on and on about Obama when it comes to that, what he had done in the past year. But you know, going back to 1901, the first person who gets the Nobel Peace Prize, Henri Dunant. And Frederick Passy, that Henri Dunant is the key one for our purposes, he founded the International Red Cross. The year before, he had spent in a nursing home in Switzerland, not doing much. The reason why he received the first Nobel Peace Prize was because he founded the International Red Cross, which, after the Battle of Solferino between the Austrians and the French, people were left screaming and dying on the battlefield for days after. There was nobody to pick them up. They didn't have any ambulances or medical corps, but you did have modern weaponry. So the casualty figures were horrendous, and the Red Cross was founded, to take care of the casualties of war. This was what he received the Nobel Peace Prize for. And the committee also gave it to 2 people, even if it says in the will, that person. So we've taken the dynamic interpretation from the earliest times. And I think part of the reason why the Nobel Peace Prize has this position in the world today is that it keeps on speaking to the questions of the day. Because, if we were to have a conservative, like literal, originalist reading of the will, only members of the old school peace movement, the peace movement that was influential in the years leading up to World War I, and had a second bloom, very short-lived in the interwar years, and haven't really been so influential since then, they would be the only people who would get the Nobel Peace Prize. And then the Nobel Peace Prize would not be a very influential award in the world. Madam? Sorry, yeah, the green person and then red. Is that right? Cheers.
I'm Ashley, and kind of jumping back to the question about what issues the United States would bring to light. You mentioned education, and Westchester has a history of being an educational a college for teachers. So I'm sure a lot of us are education majors, and I wanted to know what advice would you give to your future teachers in the room as to what we can do to give our students those opportunities and promote peace in our classrooms.
And peace in the classroom. Well, you are making it hard for me. I think the teachers in many Western countries, I'm not sure if it's true about America, but I think it is. Education is a horrible political topic because everybody who has gone to school feel they are somehow experts on education because they went to school. And they tend to think that they somehow know how things are done best. And I think that in many cases the teachers have been subjugated by politics and by politicians telling them how to run the classrooms. And I think the best thing you can do is to try to organize amongst yourself and to create that that cohesion in the group that you see amongst, for instance, doctors have it, lawyers have it, and I think teachers should have it saying, we are actually experts on this, back off. We teachers should have a much greater say about what goes on in the classroom, what is taught and how. And I think that is, to not stop being a low profile, low esteemed group, which teachers are in way too many countries. And I think part of the reason why we are failing so many young students, kids, is because we're not taking school seriously. And all I can see is that schools are so important for the success of a nation. And the teachers is a vital group in this. And then you're not receiving the respect that you deserve, and you're not going to have it handed to you by from on high. I think that you're going to have to organize and demand it, and that's my personal view. I think that's the way it was. But what do I know? I'm not a teacher. Richard.
I was going to say, I'm going to jump in to say this will need to be our final question. I don't want to be the
Oh,
heavy
I'm enjoying myself.
I know you are.
My name is Jamie, and I'd just like to ask this question because I'm sure that since you've taken your place on the Nobel Committee, you've run into a lot of situations that have taught you some things. And I was wondering if you might elaborate on what one of the most valuable things that you've learned or realized as you took your place in the committee.
I'm a slow learner. The thing about academicians, we're really good at what we do. but we can be very, very stubborn about small stuff. You know, the classical, classical professor is somebody who will say, you know, that footnote will be in my paper. I will pull the paper from the, from the edited volume. I'm not, like, it's going to be like that. It's going to be like that. And I'm a bit like that. That I'm very particular about how I want things. And in an academic setting, I know how to, I know how to have these arguments. But amongst normal people, which the rest of the committee is, Henrik Syse is another scholar, but with the two scholars to learn again how to argue a point without getting, starting, digging trenches and putting up the barbed wires, which I do in academia, is something that I'm still working on. But have I learned it? I should learn it. I'm working on it. But what can you do? It's an interesting process. I'm learning stuff all the time, and it's just such an honor for me to be a member of this 5-member committee that for a short period every year gets the world's attention, and to celebrate what's good in human nature and trying to help people in this way is intensely meaningful and also really, really tiring. After some of the meetings, you just wring up my shirt, like water coming out of it. But it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been such a pleasure. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you here tonight. And I met Westchester students in Oslo on 2 occasions now. The quality of the student body here is amazing, and you're all lucky to be Westchester students. I can say nothing more. Thank you so much.